Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Before we get started, we want to say a huge thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. Your support means so much to us. You help the channel. If you have not yet become a patron on Patreon, but you like the show, you watch the show, you like what we have to say, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon, even if it's just for 1 month. The link is down below.
Your support means that we can make more of these videos more often, because we can turn down other projects. And also, please remember to support us through Etsy as well. This year is the last year for our Etsy store, so we will be selling out of shirts like this one. This is an oldie but a goodie. Still have a couple left.
It's a good summertime shirt, because it's a tank.
And a good
You're going to be at the gym.
workout shirt.
So in today's video, we will be responding to a video called "Is Veganism Really the Answer?" by a YouTube channel called Our Changing Climate. This is not... Hi, Emmy. Hi, Emmy.
Come here, my...
Moshi.
Oh, you're hot. Be careful.
Mimi, because you're laying in the sunshine like a kitten. Hey, are you a beautiful kitten? Okay, bye. This is not a channel that we were familiar with before we were made aware of this video in particular. It seems to be a video about our changing climate. So we anticipated that this would be mostly about climate and how veganism affects the climate and the environment. There is a section in this video right here called "Is Veganism the Solution?" The full video is almost half an hour long. We won't be responding to the entire thing, but we will just be touching on this section in here.
I will preface by saying that we agree with the beginning of the video because it is fact-based. Those are just the facts. We have seen these facts before. They're very well illustrated and presented. So we really enjoyed that first part.
Right away, my spidey sense is tingling a little bit whenever you have seemingly the guy that runs this channel, a non-vegan, heaping a lot of praise on veganism and plant-based diets at the beginning. I feel like there's a but coming. You know, when people always say, of course we should do X, of course we should do Y, of course this is great. But that's what I feel like is coming in this section of the video.
If we know that the meat industry under capitalism is exploitative and destructive, what then should we do about it? How should we begin to approach the massive struggle of dismantling this harmful system? The answer to that question always seems to be going vegan. Without fail, when you talk about the destruction of the meat industry, veganism always comes up as the solution. Indeed.
Well, I think there's a reason for that, and that is because vegans do not give money to the meat industry. We withhold our support of the meat industry.
It is essentially the opposite of what was happening in the whole beginning of the video, which involved supporting the meat industry.
The reason why we have factory farms right now is because so many billions of people support the meat industry, and they want meat, and they want it cheap, and they want it every day for every meal. And so this was the solution to provide the world with cheap meat.
That's what strikes me about when people are like, oh, we need to go back to the old ways of farming. I'm like, yeah, how? How are you going to go do that? How are you going to feed 8 billion people?
That would require everyone eating way less meat than they eat now and paying way more for the meat that they do eat when they do eat it on those rare occasions, which doesn't sound like something that most people want to do.
UN, Project Drawdown, and a whole host of animal advocates.
Now, I stopped eating meat because I learned about the intensive animal agriculture.
And you can make a difference by even once a day or once a week choosing not to eat animals or animal products.
All propose plant-based diets as a significant solution to climate change and environmental degradation. On an individual level, that is certainly true. The research shows that for those who live in the imperial core who are seeking a way to shrink their carbon footprint, adopting a plant-rich diet is one of the most...
What is an
Imperial core?
Are we
I have
in
a
the feudal, like...
If I had to guess, he's talking about people who live in Western countries, because my guess would be he's talking about imperialism. If you live in what we typically call like Western society or Western civilization countries like Canada, the United States, most of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, basically anywhere you can and do shop at grocery stores for your food, you should go vegan, which is also pretty much what vegans say. Vegans are almost always talking to fellow humans who live in the same conditions that we live in or in the same countries that we live in. So he's saying if you can go vegan, you should, which...
So far, so good.
Diet is one of the most effective actions. That's because, as I mentioned before, growing plants is significantly less emissions and land intensive than raising animals for slaughter. We can see here that even the largest carbon footprint of plant proteins, tofu, is smaller than the smallest carbon footprint of meat and dairy products. Indeed,
Tofu, beans, peas, nuts appear to be on the negative side of the line.
Yeah.
For all the people who complain about almonds. Oh, almonds use a lot of water. Almonds use a lot of land. Like, just look at this.
Almonds is just one nut. You don't have to have that nut.
So right here, beef, absolutely horrible for the planet. Lamb, absolutely horrible for the planet. Farmed shrimp, absolutely horrible for the oceans.
Unsurprisingly. All the trawling.
Yeah, then cheese. Cheese is really bad, uses a lot of water. Like, you need a ton of water to produce very little milk. Like, we're turning water into milk. It's very inefficient.
He said earlier in the video too, the calories that you get back are minimal compared to how many calories go into the industry. These are calories that the animals have to consume themselves before the animals are turned into calories.
We feed cows a lot of plants and give them a lot of water and use a lot of land. And then what we get out of a cow, not that much, not very good.
Tofu is smaller than the smallest carbon footprint of meat and dairy products. Indeed, a meta-analysis of over 700 food production systems asserts ruminant meat had impacts 20 to 100 times those of plants, while milk, eggs, pork, poultry, and seafood had impacts 2 to 25 times higher than plants. Study after study has found that eating a plant-based diet lowers your personal carbon footprint. And when considering
I still feel there's a butt coming. It's like he's like stacking the deck.
It's so weird because all of this is like, yeah, correct. That is facts. So
absolutely.
So what is the but?
So show your support of plant products when you go to the grocery store. Very simple.
Considering the range of climate action tactics available to us, going vegan is much easier than welding a pipeline valve shut. It might give agency to those who otherwise feel like they can't change anything about the climate crisis. But veganism has a number of pitfalls that must be addressed. For one, veganism attempts to use consumer-side power to influence production-side destruction. Veganism, while certainly one of the best things you can do as an individual, still buys into and reinforces the myth of consumer change.
Whoa. The myth of consumer change? Does this here? I've heard this before and it baffles me that this is literally economics 101. What myth? The consumer directly impacts the market. The dollars that we put into a certain market influences that market to produce more.
I'm going to go way out on a limb here and assume that the person who runs this channel lives in the imperial core and can choose to buy plant-based products at the grocery store. He can do the thing that he says you should do, but I'm guessing he's not doing it all the time.
I'm guessing it's because he's not vegan.
Yes. And so to say like, well, if the consumers can't change the industry as a whole, obviously, yes, there are problems with every industry, every corporation, but at the same time, there's a reason why sales of landline phones are in the toilet right now and sales of cellular telephones are way up. And it's because everyone wants a cell phone, everyone tries to buy a cell phone, everyone supports the cellular telephone, as opposed to the landline telephone. We moved from landline phones to cell phones. We moved from typewriters to computers. We moved from horses and carriages to automobiles. That's where the money went. That's where the demand went. And that's where the supply went.
That happens with innovation.
If every single person in the imperial core only bought plant foods, do you think that we would see an increased supply in plant foods or animal foods?
This is logic.
Under a capitalist system, transformation doesn't come from the point of consumption, but from the point of production. The owners of our system...
Whoa. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean...
but how does that happen?
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta be a little harsh here because so far, so good until we got to this. Again, what influences production, if not our demands, our money? We've talked about this before and we're seeing it right now, by the way. With with SAG-AFTRA, with the union strikes going on, corporations care very little, if not at all, about morals and ethics. That is not what drives their business decisions. It is profit. It's very rare that a company exists just for the sake of doing good. Those would be nonprofits.
I would also argue, to use that same example, oh, we can't change things from the consumer side. Well, it seems that over the past 2 or 3 years, most consumers have opted for streaming their TV shows and movies more than watching them on cable or going to a movie theater. And so the industry has changed. It's adapted. It's now offering more things via streaming because more people have put their money into streaming. On top of that, they're also trying to squeeze out what they have to pay the actors in order to maximize the profits.
And that is why we are on strike. Our strike, our actions, our decisions as consumers are going to affect the business decision.
Of production. The slaughterhouses, the meatpacking plants, and feedlots have immense control of how many cows are raised or how many chicken tenders are sold.
No.
But yes, well, I would say yes. These companies have control over the meat and the chicken, but if you don't buy the meat and the chicken, they don't have control over you anymore.
That was my no. I just skipped to the...
You skip straight to the logical conclusion.
Production has tripled since the 1970s, despite a significant adoption of plant-based diets. So,
Well, hold on. Meat production has gone up despite significant adoption of plant-based diets. Last time I checked, vegans were only like 1 to 3% of the population.
Yeah, like also the population's growing.
The other 99 to 97% of the growing population is still buying meat.
70s, despite a significant adoption of plant-based diets. So veganism should be seen as just one tactic in a broader toolkit to dismantle the destruction of animal agriculture. There are so many other tactics out there that might even have more of an impact than eating a solely plant-based diet.
Such
and yet
as?
a vegan diet always seems to be held up as the solution. In a way, this feels eerily similar to the carbon footprint shaming campaign enacted by British Petroleum.
What size is your carbon footprint?
Much in the same way fossil fuel emissions have become our individual problem, the meat industry's disastrous impact has to be somehow solved with our dietary decisions.
Okay, not perfectly analogous here because if you want to put gasoline in your gasoline-powered vehicle, you can't choose anything other than gasoline. Your body can run on a variety of types of fuel, whereas your car, if it's gasoline-powered, can only run on gasoline.
And making the change, the switch to an EV vehicle, for example, is less accessible for most people than it would be to opt for a plant-based diet.
Exactly.
Because, you know, that requires a generous investment.
To his point, wealthy people in the imperial core could choose to put solar panels on their roof, buy a battery, buy an electric-powered vehicle, and run their house completely on solar power and just be off the grid entirely. Like, you could choose to do that.
And
people do. And it's very, very expensive up front. However, buying rice and beans and oats and potatoes instead of animal products, super easy, super affordable, super accessible.
for most people. That's not to say that the more people eventually switch over to EV, the less demand there will be for fuel. It's just going to take a little bit longer. And the more competition, the less expensive solar panels and EV cars will be.
As Matt Huber writes in Climate Change is Class War, under neoliberal capitalism, individual behavioral change sometimes appears to be the only meaningful option to do something about climate change. So while projections like this one that propose that if everyone adopted a plant-based diet, we could offset 68% of carbon emissions this century are extremely enticing, we need to be careful how we interpret that information. Everyone in the world will not just
How we interpret that information, that is apparently factual.
The rapid global phase out of animal agriculture has the potential to stabilize greenhouse gas levels for 30 years and offset 68% of carbon emissions this century. Why must we be careful about that fact?
Let's see.
We need to be careful how we interpret that information. Everyone in the world will not just voluntarily take up a plant-based diet, because despite...
Not with that attitude, my friend. Here's a dude that lives in the imperial core, perfectly aware of the harm that animal agriculture is doing to the planet, perfectly aware that if he himself and everyone else adopts a plant-based diet, we could reduce global CO2 emissions by 68% in this century, and you're still not willing to do it. Of course not everyone's willing to do it, including you.
Despite the increasing popularization of meatless eating, the meat industry has a strong control of food production in the United States. Even plant-based alternatives...
No. If you don't buy meat and dairy and eggs, then the meat, dairy, and egg industries don't have control over you.
Corporations are made of individuals. If we don't change, they don't change.
Meat industry has a strong control of food production in the United States. Even plant-based alternatives like Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers, and now Tyson's own plant-based line are still wrapped up and consumed by capitalist processes. Their patent.
I wonder why Tyson chose to have a plant-based line. Why didn't they just keep selling chicken? Why do they offer plant-based chicken?
Could it be because they see a market in plant-based chicken?
That's weird.
Gloss over that fact, why don't you?
I wonder if everyone buys the Tyson plant-based chicken over the actual chicken flesh, what do you think they're going to make more of?
Like, are your minds blown by this? Tell us in the comments.
Tyson's own plant-based line are still wrapped up and consumed by capitalist processes. They're patented and controlled not by the people democratically, but by just a few CEOs and investors.
Op-ed, giant meat and dairy companies are dominating the plant-based and cellular meat market. Cellular meat is not highlighted for some reason, but I think they mean lab-grown meat. I wonder why these giant meat and dairy companies are starting to sell plant-based and cellular meat products. Maybe because they see a demand for it, and maybe they want to supply that.
Investors who are often the same ones in the meat industry, who are looking to profit off shifting diets. Not only that, but pushes for global veganism can be colored, perhaps unconsciously, by imperialist tendencies. As Max Eil writes in A People's Green New Deal, claiming that a meatless society is a good thing creates an immediate moral justification for doing things to stop people, especially pastoralists in the third world, from ceasing to raise or eat meat.
Has the word pastoralist ever even come out of our mouths in any of...
No. Have you heard of any mainstream vegan activist trying to convince pastoralists in the third world to stop eating meat and dairy and eggs?
In the definition of veganism, if it's possible and practicable. We are speaking to the majority of people in Western countries who have access to these products. It's just not even something we consider.
Yeah, this really reminds me of we responded to a Vice article about is veganism racist or something. Also, there was a Goodful response where they talked about what about goat farmers in Iran?
Yeah.
It's okay, you live in the United States. What about goat farmers in Iran?
Yeah, how does that impact your decision? I mean, that's just deflection at its core, because that just means that you are looking for excuses to not be vegan.
You're saying
even if they're far-reaching.
Yeah, you spent 19 minutes going through this video saying all the reasons why people who can be vegan should be vegan. And you're like, but it could come across as insensitive to pastoralists in the third world. Okay, are you going to buy animal products at the grocery store because there are pastoralists in the third world?
Especially pastoralists in the third world, from ceasing to raise or eat meat. What Eil is keying into here is that we must avoid a top-down approach to a vegan society.
It's not top-down if it's consumer-based. That's what we're saying. We're saying go to the grocery store, buy the plant-based products, and the industries will change from the bottom up because they will see the demand and they will change the supply. So it's not top-down. Most vegans don't advocate for top-down change.
One where the imperial core's guilt over exploitative meat industrialism turns into backlash against peasant ranchers in the imperial periphery. The struggle must be taken to the Tysons and Cargills of the world, not those raising cows just to put food on the table. Because for many, there are also a number of cultural barriers to going vegan. Whether it's your grandma's famous turkey pot pie, the cattle ranged for subsistence, or the salmon your people have been fishing for hundreds of generations, meat can hold spiritual and communal significance.
Okay, so what? So what?
Yeah,
we are talking about climate change. We're talking about a destructive force unleashed by us and our actions towards the earth. We are talking about the end of civilization, possibly, and we're worried about grandma's pot pie. We need to put things in perspective here.
I would wonder, is grandma going to be around for the inferno that the earth becomes? My grandma likes to cook animal products too. I don't eat animal products. And my grandma still loves me, and I still love my grandma. I don't have to eat cookies with dairy butter in them. I can eat cookies that grandma made with vegan butter in them, also known as margarine. And we can still have cookies at Christmas time, and it's
And
fine.
we can still have a relationship. If that is the core of your relationship with someone, I would say maybe try to work on that relationship a little bit more. I would hope that my relationship to anyone means more than just food. And as we know, tradition doesn't justify violence.
No.
Or continuing to destroy our planet.
Yeah, there's lots of traditions that many grandmas have had for millennia throughout the existence of the Homo sapien species. People are so
delicate.
They're precious about their food. It's like you can make a vegan version.
Yeah, we're talking about climate change. We're talking about destruction. But spiritual and communal significance, because our feelings are so important. Really?
I know this video is about the environment, but also what about the feelings of the innocent sentient beings that we are forcing into gas chambers and slaughterhouses to make this pot pie? Do their feelings count? Does that matter? I know you've been fishing salmon for hundreds of generations, but maybe we care about the salmon now. Maybe the salmon's feelings matter. Maybe the salmon's community matters before we run out of salmon.
Plant-based diets, especially veganism, leave little room for those emotionally important meals. Because veganism
does not leave little room for those emotionally important... Like, do people not think that vegans celebrate holidays or family traditions?
Or eat good food?
Vegans celebrate Thanksgiving. We just do it without killing animals. We celebrate Christmas. We celebrate birthdays and anniversaries, and we go to family reunions, and everyone celebrates their religion. You can be vegan and do all of those things. You just don't eat the animal products while doing it.
Veganism, at its core, is a restrictive diet. One which, if we're not careful, might exacerbate already present disordered eating or...
Whoa! So much in that. First of all, restrictive? What? 40,000 edible plants, guys, on the planet that I would guarantee most meat eaters don't even know about. Because people tend to be very routine oriented. They eat the same thing every week, every day. They just have like a handful of core dishes that they know how to make. Maybe your food choices expanded a little bit more after you went vegan, because now you have to think, you have to put a little thought into it. Like, oh, what is this spice? I wonder what this does. I wonder what, how can we use these nuts and these seeds? Oh, I've never heard of this berry. What is this berry?
Yeah.
If anything, it's expanded our palates.
Absolutely has expanded.
So much more.
Not only do you have the processed veganized version, like if you like buffalo chicken wings, you can easily get vegan buffalo chicken wings, no problem. And you can still have them with French fries, and you can even get plant-based blue cheese dressing to dip your vegan buffalo chicken wings in, and it tastes exactly the same. But on top of that, if you don't want to eat processed junk and you want to return to whole foods, like as they come out of the earth, then you can make whole food plant-based dishes too. For us, our repertoire of what we cook has only gotten bigger.
And let me also quickly point out I don't want to gloss over this little part.
One which, if we're not careful, might exacerbate already present disordered eating or give rise to it. In part,
I would like to see data behind this, because to make that a blanket statement that you just throw in this video that is so fact-based, up until this point at least, is nuts to me. To conflate veganism with eating disorders. Veganism does not necessarily cause eating disorders, but I would argue if someone already has an eating disorder, they could see veganism as a further way to restrict. But as we know, veganism is not about restriction. It is about simply not taking what wasn't ours to begin with. It is about eliminating animal exploitation from our lives as far as is possible and practicable. The impetus is ethics.
In part, this is because it can often feel that if you take even just one bite of meat, you're immediately shamed as a bad vegan. And when you consider that...
No.
Wait.
If you take one bite of meat, you're just not vegan.
You're just not vegan. I mean, you could be predominantly plant-based. And you could eat plant-based 364 days out of the year, and then on Thanksgiving, you decide to eat turkey. You're not vegan, but you're predominantly plant-based. Let's just put it in another context. Let's say you don't abuse your child 364 days out of the year, but then on Christmas Eve, every year you do a little bit of child abuse. I don't want to feel like I'm a bad anti-child abuser just for abusing my child one day out of the year. That's how ridiculous that is. Veganism is an ethical lifestyle that seeks to exclude animal exploitation. So if you purposefully and needlessly exploit animals, even if it's just one time out of the year, you're not abiding by that ethical lifestyle.
I think this also appeals to people who are against labeling. And the people who tend to be against labeling are the people contributing to the meat industry.
Is ever present, especially in the US, in our stores, our restaurants, and even our clothes. It can be taxing both financially and mentally to find alternatives.
What I've seen is that people tend to go vegan at their own pace. Some people do it overnight, which I think is great. I wish I'd done it overnight. I went vegetarian first without connecting the dots.
Yeah, we both did.
Yeah.
And the thing that vegans say all the time, wish I had done it sooner.
People just make this mountain out of this molehill. It doesn't need to be.
No, it takes one trip to the grocery store. Like if you normally spend an hour at the grocery store, the next time you go, schedule 2 hours at the grocery store next time in advance so that you can flip over everything that you normally buy and just look at the ingredients.
Which you should be doing anyway.
That's it. And then once you know the products that are plant-based and the ones that aren't, it's quick, it's easy. It just becomes part of your routine. It's super simple.
I don't need to tell you that this is for your own good. You know, we fight so hard for our bodily autonomy. Why isn't this part of it? What you put in your mouth, in your body, you should have some say in that, some agency, right?
All this is not to say that you shouldn't go vegan. Indeed, embracing a plant-based diet can be a great first step in acquiring agency under the meat industrial complex. But
that's what vegans advocate for. That's exactly what vegans say. If you buy your food at a grocery store, next time you go to the grocery store, buy plant-based food instead.
Say that embracing a plant-based diet can be extremely hard in a meat-centric world.
His point about like meat being everywhere, so it's hard to go vegan. Are we that feeble? Like people are so weak-willed sometimes. They're like, oh, it's hard. Where's the, I'm gonna take charge of this.
Yeah.
I can do it. No big deal. But it's like, I want this.
Even a person like him, he agrees with veganism. He agrees that it's horrible for the environment. He agrees that if you live in the imperial core, you should be vegan. But, and then a laundry list of those that are easily debunkable. Because my guess is there's at least one animal product on this planet that this guy really loves and really doesn't want to stop eating. Even though there's a plant-based replacement for it, he's going to come up with, he's doing all sorts of tap dancing in this video. He's doing all putting on a big show just to feel good about continuing to exploit animals and killing the planet. This thing that I do is bad. But goat farmers in Iran and grandma's chicken pot pie and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Vegan activist Earthling Ed argues that the problem is not the restrictiveness of the vegan diet, but instead he argues that we should be focusing on
making vegan food more accessible and convenient and tasty and affordable. And we should make sure that being vegan is a socially acceptable and normal thing to do so people don't feel isolated within their social groups.
But in order to do that, veganism needs to be seen as just one small step. Because to forge a plant-based system and dismantle the meat industry, we need to tear down the very scaffolding of the system itself. Those support pillars.
So who's we? We, right? As individuals.
Yeah. And how? What's your plan?
Yeah. People tend to
we need to take down systems of oppression. Okay, how?
They look up here, they're like, we need to da-da-da. Who are you talking to, we? Like, what are we? Yeah. Who are we?
We agree with you.
We agree with you.
By the way.
But I think people like to blame corporations just because it's easier. It just takes the responsibility off their shoulders.
Yeah, and I would argue, what's more doable? Buying oat milk instead of cow milk, or dismantling the capitalism of the imperial core? What is easier for the average person? We're vegan activists. We advocate on behalf of animals. And what we do is we offer things that people can do right now, easily, to make that change. You already go to the grocery store. Great. Next time you go to the grocery store, buy plant-based foods instead of animal-based foods. But they're expensive though. Okay, great. Buy dried rice, dried beans, dried oats, dried lentils, canned corn, canned vegetables, frozen vegetables. There's so many things that are very, 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 very cheap. Cheaper than fast food, cheaper than processed animal products. You can live cheaper on a plant-based diet than you can on an animal-based one. We give people things to do that are tangible, that you can do.
I mean, he had it right at the beginning where he said, you know, we have agency.
Yes.
We do.
Those support pillars that make a plant-based meal much more difficult to cook up.
We cook plant-based meals 3 times a day, every day. So does every vegan. And so have many vegans for decades. Actually, to touch briefly on what Earthling Ed said, like we should make veganism more accessible and more normal. Like it is more normal than ever.
Yeah.
Plant-based foods are more accessible than ever. They are cheaper than ever. And that is more normalized than ever.
And we continue to normalize it by more of us going vegan, by embracing fellow vegans instead of, you know.
And then he goes on to part 4, which we just wanted to cover that part 3 part about veganism being the solution. I would just say ultimately, like, he's engaging in deflection. We have many videos about that. Whataboutism is rampant throughout this section. And just the same old excuses that we've heard time and time again from many meat eaters. Ancestors, though. Tradition, though. What about poor farmers in the third world, though? What if we come across as racist, though? What, we should just take down the system of capitalism instead of just buying something different at the grocery store, because it's much easier to dismantle capitalism than to just buy rice.
And we gotta be harsh here, because honestly, we see video after video, and again, this is a pretty big platform, almost 500,000 subscribers. That's a huge responsibility. Your words are having a huge impact. Do you think this video motivated people to go vegan? No, it just probably gave them another excuse not to. What difference are you making? None. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Somehow we will change these imperialist corporations abstractly, completely uninfluenced by you, the consumer.
Yeah, I don't know what the point is of these types of videos. Like, we've responded to these types of videos where they spend half the video laying down fact after fact after fact about why you should, in fact, eat plant-based. Even if you don't go vegan, you don't care about the ethics of animal rights, but you should just eat plant-based. Here are all the reasons why you should do that. And then at right around the halfway point, he's like, but, and then he lays out all these excuses why not to go. So like you said, what is the average non-vegan viewer to take from this video? Are they going to change? Or are they going to go like, oh yeah, that's right, there are goat farmers in Iran. Okay, I'll just keep going to McDonald's. Because that's usually what people need, very little to not change.
Yeah.
Like if people can get the little tiniest little morsel of an excuse, then they're like, oh, thank God, I don't have to change. And then they do things like, you know, like all the other quote unquote progressives online, how they say, well, yeah, I try to avoid factory farmed meat. Okay, Sam Cedar. Okay. Yeah, we totally believe you. Yeah, David Packman, you do your best to avoid factory farmed animal. I'm sure you do when you go buy a cappuccino with milk in it at a coffee shop. That's all factory. Every animal product at every grocery store and restaurant, 99+%, they're all factory farmed. Everyone says they try this or they aim to do this or they do their best to do this. It's all an excuse to just not change.
The only thing that will save this planet is compassion. That's the only thing. That concludes our discussion for this video. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything we've said. Do you believe that us as consumers are capable of creating change? Haven't we done it before?
And of course, a huge, huge thank you once again to all of our patrons on Patreon. We so appreciate your support. And if you would like to consider becoming a patron on Patreon, even if it's just for 1 month, just a one-time donation, please consider it. The link is down below. Also, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and that little drop-down option. Make sure that you turn on all notifications so that you're notified every time we put out a video. And until the next one.